Solving equations with fractions, part 2. Now, once again, just like with solving equations with adding and subtracting, all we're doing is we're going ahead and doing the exact same thing we would do with integers. So if we look here at this example here, you see here e divided by 3/4 is equal to 1/2. So all we're going to do is we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by 3/4. When we do that, remember this here cancels out because it's divided by something and then multiplied by the same thing. So that just cancels it out. So that's pretty easy. So now we just got e over here by itself. And that's equal to 1/2 times 3/4. And so we just have 3/8. And just check quickly to see if that makes sense. Well, this is about 1/2. This is about, well, let's say this is about 1/2 divided by 1. Well, you know what? This here, it isn't quite 1/2. It's less than 1/2. This is more than 1/2. So it would make sense that this would be less than 1. But we're at least not way off just by looking at that to see that 1/2 is a reasonable estimate, because it's not something outlandish like a big whole number or a really, really tiny number either. So exact same problem here. The only thing I did was I changed it from division over here to multiplication to see what happens. So remember, we got to go ahead and divide by 3/4. Divide by 3/4. And once again, we go ahead and this cancels out. So now we're just left with e is equal to 1/2 divided by 3/4. And we've got to flip that, second one, change it to the reciprocal. 1/2 times 4/3. And remember that trick we talked about before. Since there's a 2 on the bottom and a factor and a multiple of 2 on the top, I can just change that 2 to a 1, change this 4 to a 2, and then I'll come up with my most simplified version of my answer. Then it's just going to be 1 times 2 and 1 times 3, so it's just going to be 2/3. So does that make sense? 2/3 times 3/4 is equal to 1/2. Well, 2/3 is less than 1, and then multiply it by even something it's even less than 1. So that's going to be less than either of them. So that would make sense. Now this is a pretty complex problem, this next one here, but it's the same method we've done before. So the first thing we need to do is, this is 3/5 b plus 1/6 is equal to 5.5. So the very first thing we need to do is get rid of that 1/6. We do that just like we would do in any problem that was addition. So we subtract the 1/6, and now we're just left with 3/5 b, because remember, this whole thing, this whole part cancels out. So that's equal to 5.5 minus 1/6. Now I've got to change that to 5 and 3/6 minus 1/6 because I want to get a common denominator. And this will get a whole lot of the skills that we've been using and show you how you would go ahead and do that. And now I have 3 minus 1, so that's 2/6. If I want to simplify it further, I would then just go ahead and say 5 and 1/3. So I go back here. 5 and 1/3 is equal to 3/5 b. So let me rewrite that up here. I'm only halfway done with the problem. So yeah, it's a pretty long and involved problem. 5 and 1/3 here. So now I've got to get rid of this 3/5 times b. Remember, 3/5 is in front of the b. That means it's a multiplication problem. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 3/5. When I divide both sides by 3/5, once again, this all cancels out here, and then I'm left with just b is equal to whatever on the other side, which is going to be 5 1/3 divided by 3/5. Let me just draw a line here to make it clear that we're in a separate part of the problem. So now I've got to go ahead and change that. I've got to flip it. Because it's a division problem, I've got to multiply by the reciprocal. 5 1/3. Just do it very methodically. And paper, as I always say, is cheap. So 5/3 is what changes into a multiplication problem when you divide by 3/5. So I've got to now change that first number, since I'm multiplying, to an improper fraction. So that's going to be 16/3 plus 5/3, or times 5/3. And then when I multiply this out, I'm going to end up with 9/9. And this is going to be 80, because 10 times 5 is 50, 6 times 5 is 30, so that's going to be 80/9, which is then going to be equal to, 9 goes into 81 9 times, so it's 8 times with 8 ninths left over. So now I've just got to see if this makes sense. 8 and 8 ninths. Well, this is close to 9, so I plug that back in here. This is about a half. 1/2 times 9, that's going to be about 4.5, plus this relatively small amount, so we can just assign 0 for that. So 4.5. Is that close to equal to 5.5? Yeah, it's a pretty good estimate, so we're probably right.